We hear that term all the time, processed food. And usually it's not in a good way, right? But what does that even mean? I mean, is a can of beans the same as a bag of potato chips? Is all processing bad? It's all pretty confusing. So today, we're going to cut through all that noise and give you a straight up, science based explainer on what you really need to know. I mean, just think about that for a second. More than half of our daily energy comes from food that was, well, engineered on a factory line. This isn't about judging anyone's grocery cart, not at all. It's about getting a handle on this massive shift in our food system and figuring out what it really means for our health. Okay, so first things first, we gotta get our terms straight. Processed isn't some simple on or off switch. The key thing that food scientists want us to understand is that it's actually a spectrum. It ranges from foods that are barely touched all the way to things that are heavily, heavily engineered. And way over on the far end of that spectrum, that's where you find the stuff that researchers are really zeroing in on. They're called ultra-processed foods, or UPFs for short. Now, these aren't just foods with a little salt or sugar added. Nope. These are industrial formulas, designed from the ground up for maximum convenience and incredibly long shelf life and flavors that are, well, almost addictive. They pretty much define the modern snack aisle.
So, to help us make sense of this whole spectrum, scientists developed a really handy framework called the NOVA system. It's a simple four-part scale. Group 1 is the whole stuff, fresh fruits, veggies, meat. Group 2 is the stuff we cook with, like oils and salt. Group 3 covers simple processed foods, like canned tuna or a basic loaf of bread. And Group 4, yep, you guessed it, that's the ultra-processed stuff, the UPFs. This little chart is going to be key to understanding all the science that comes next.
All right, so now that we're all on the same page about what UPFs are, the next question is kind of obvious. How much of this stuff are we really eating? And the answer is a lot, a whole lot. And this isn't just one country, it's a global thing. 55%. Seriously, just let that number sink in for a minute. For the average person in the United States, more than half of their daily calories come directly from these ultra-processed foods. That means more than half of their energy is coming from Group 4 on that chart we just looked at. You see this giant slice of the pie here? That's it. That shows just how much we're relying on UPFs. And what's maybe even more concerning is that, according to the source material, when you look at kids and teenagers, that number jumps to nearly 2/3 of their daily calories. It seems like the younger you are, the more your diet is dominated by these foods. So we eat a lot of this stuff, but does it actually matter? What's the big deal? Well, what does the science have to say about a diet that's packed with these foods? To find out, we're going to look at two really powerful types of evidence: super solid controlled experiments and huge long-term studies of big populations. Let's start with the absolute gold standard for proving cause and effect in science, a randomized controlled trial. A few years ago, researchers at the National Institutes of Health set up this landmark study to figure out the direct effects of eating UPFs. The way they designed this was, honestly, just brilliant. They took a group of people and had them eat either an unprocessed diet or an ultra-processed diet for 2 weeks. But here's the kicker. They perfectly matched the two diets for things like calories, fat, sugar, and fiber. The only real difference was the level of processing. And the results? Whoa. They were just stunning. The folks on the UPF diet, without even trying, ate over 500 extra calories a day and gained about 2 pounds in just 2 weeks. It's like something about the foods themselves was pushing them to overeat. Okay, so that's what happens in a controlled lab. But what about in the real world? Well, when scientists look at huge groups of people over many, many years, the findings are incredibly consistent. For every 10% jump in UPFs in someone's diet, there's a measurable increase in the risk for major diseases. We're talking higher cancer risk, higher risk of heart problems, obesity, diabetes. It's not just one study. It's a super clear and pretty undeniable pattern. All right, the evidence is pretty overwhelming, right? But the question is, why? What is it about these foods that seems to have such a big impact on our bodies? Well, the science points to a few key reasons. It looks like there are 3 main things going on. First, they are basically engineered for us to overeat them. Their soft textures and super intense flavors let us eat them really, really fast, which short circuits our body's natural "I'm full" signals. Second, their nutrient profile is often flipped upside down. They're low in the good stuff like fiber and vitamins, but absolutely packed with sugar, unhealthy fats, and sodium. And third, there's this idea of hidden exposures to chemicals, from additives or even the packaging, which some researchers think could lead to issues like inflammation or mess with our hormones over time. Okay, I know that was a lot of pretty heavy science, but look, the whole point of this explainer isn't to scare you, it's to arm you with knowledge. So let's flip the script. Let's talk about the practical playbook. What can we actually do with all of this information? And yeah, this is the big question, right? It can feel like this stuff is just everywhere. It's in every aisle of the grocery store, every vending machine. It feels impossible to avoid. But the good news is, the science also points to some simple, effective strategies that don't mean you have to be perfect. Here are 4 science-backed tips that can make a real difference. First, try to build your meals around whole foods. You know, everything from Group 1 on that Nova chart. Second, become an ingredient list detective. A good rule of thumb is if the list is a paragraph long and reads like a chemistry experiment, that's a pretty big red flag. Third, cooking more at home is a game changer because you have total control over what goes in. And fourth, start with the easy wins. Just limiting sugary drinks and those ready-to-eat snacks often makes the biggest impact right away. You know, this quote from the research just kind of nails it. The goal isn't to be perfect. It's not about totally eliminating every single processed food for the rest of your life. It's about shifting the balance. The safest, most evidence-backed approach is simply to limit these ultra-processed products and build your diet around real, whole foods as much as you can. So, at the end of the day, this isn't about getting bogged down in rigid rules. It's just about awareness. So maybe the next time you're at the grocery store or sitting down for a meal, just take a second to pause and ask yourself this one simple but really powerful question. What's really on my plate?